right, let's talk about the Northern Renaissance. This is going to be slightly different than the Renaissance that started in Florence, but some of the same great ideas. So our central question is, what types of art and literature did the Northern Renaissance produce? So by the 15th century, Renaissance ideas had spread from Italy into Northern Europe, specifically England, France, Germany, and Flanders, which is modern-day Netherlands. France, in contrast to the Italian city-states, France and England had turned into powerful monarchies, and the monarchs of these countries commissioned artists and architects. Okay, so if you look at the map, Italy, Florence is right here, and basically through trade and information, the Renaissance will spread into northern Italy. So here's England, and here's the Netherlands. So German and Flemish painters. In 1494, a French king invaded northern Italy, causing several people, including artists, to flee to other parts of Europe. Artists from England, France, Germany, and Flanders would go to study in southern Italy and bring back Renaissance ideas to their homelands. The most famous of these was German artist Albrecht Dürer, whose paintings portrayed religious subjects, classical myths, or legends and landscapes. Recently, on Pawn Stars, if you've heard of that show, somebody actually brought in a painting from Dürer, and it sold for, I think they paid like $5,000, but let's check it out.
I got this picture here. It's from like, says 1500s. As far as I'm concerned, this is like a scary picture. I mean, I wouldn't want to hang this on my wall.
I really like it.
You're a weird individual for liking this stuff. I don't like it. I came to the pawn shop because I have an old print that I have to sell. I don't know really what it is. It looks a little sadistic and it looks a little satanic to me. If I got a couple of grand, I'd be happy. If I got more, it'd be even nicer.
Believe it or not, you got something really cool here. This is an engraving by Albrecht Dürer. Actually, he's a pretty famous artist.
Do you think that this is an original?
It appears to be an original pressing from that engraving. If you can get one from the 1500s in its original state, it's worth $300,000. But this is not 1500. The paper is not right. I'm not really sure about the value. Normally, I'd call my buddy Brett, but he's busy with a new gallery opening, so I'm going to have to take a gamble on the price. How much did you want for it?
Couple $1,000. Is it worth that? Maybe it's worth more. I don't know.
I'll give you $5,000 for it.
How about 6,000?
You did think it was worth $2,000.
Right. You know.
I'll tell you what. I'll give you $5,500.
All right. Okay. Tough negotiators.
I feel really good about this buy, but I won't know for sure if the gamble is worth it till I have it appraised.
Wow, Albrecht Dürer. Do you mind if I take it out of the frame to take a closer look?
Go right ahead.
I get all manner of fine art coming in here, but when you're talking about an Albrecht Dürer etching that's potentially hundreds of years old, that doesn't come down the pike too often. This piece is called The Night, Death, and the Devil. Most historians agree is a visual image of Psalm 23. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. It's dark, the lines are crisp, the composition itself is very strong. It's almost certainly from the original plate. You can see the plate marks, the dimensions match up. I think it's a very nice impression circa 17th century. And even though it's not an early impression, it's a valuable one. I mean, I've seen pieces like this sell at auction anywhere from 20 grand to 50 grand.
Yeah.
So I imagine you did pretty well. I don't know what you paid for it, but
I paid $5,500 for it.
Okay, wow.
Like I said, it was a gamble when I bought it. But thanks, man.
Anytime you pay $5,500 for something, that's a sizable investment. But Rick knows what he's doing. A little too much, so I'm afraid he might not need an art expert anymore.
right, so that was a little bit interesting, right? So a Dürer painting was taken into Pawn Stars, and somebody made a little bit of money. So there are other painters. Flemish painters like Jan van Eyck used oil paintings in several layers to give an effect which showed a variety of colors and realism. So if you remember, we looked at this painting yesterday, and we talked about the classicism in there with the arches and the columns, and then we basically analyzed who was in the painting as well as the different techniques used. We're also going to have some writers in the Northern Renaissance. So when humanist ideas spread north, writers used these ideas to criticize the church, leading to what is known as Christian humanism, which called for a reform of society, specifically the education of the masses, including women. Now, that's going to be a radical idea at this time because the education of women wasn't that important to the society at this time period. The two most prominent Christian humanists were Desiderius Erasmus and Thomas More. In 1509, Erasmus wrote his satirical in praise of folly, which made fun of Renaissance society. So he suggested people should study the Bible for moral and societal guidance. Thomas More attempted to create the perfect society in his book Utopia, which was an imaginary land free of greed and corruption. His book Utopia would later influence Karl Marx. We also have Christine de Pizan. She was a highly educated and one of the first women to earn a living as a writer. She wrote about objections men had to educating women. You can see that objection that men had. She addresses it in the following quote from her book, The Book of the City of Ladies. She says, "I am amazed by the opinion of some men who claim that they do not want their daughters, wives, or kinswomen to be educated because their mores, meaning morals, would be ruined as a result. Here you can clearly see that not all opinions of men are based on reason and that these men are wrong." Okay, so she argued for the education of women. The Elizabethan Age. The Renaissance in England was known as the Elizabethan Age since Queen Elizabeth was in power for much of the 16th century. Elizabeth was well educated and did much to support English culture. The most famous writer of the Elizabethan Age, England, and perhaps the world, was William Shakespeare. His most famous plays, such as Romeo and Juliet, Julius Caesar, and Hamlet, examined human emotions and conditions. The printing press. In 1440, German craftsman Johann Gutenberg combined several existing technologies, block printing, movable type, and oil-based ink to create the printing press, a machine which could mass-produce books quickly to keep up with the increased demand during the Renaissance. At first, religious books like the Bible were produced, but soon secular books, plays, and newspapers were also produced. Because of the printing press, that's how information was able to travel so quickly, and also how more books were able to be put in the hands of the common people. So because of the printing press, we're also going to see an increased rate of literacy. So the printing press, previous to that, a copyist took 5 months to produce a single book. Because of the printing press, they could now produce 500 books in the same amount of time. So as you can see, this is a phenomenal innovation, and it's going to greatly increase the amount of books or literature that's available to people. Let's talk about the legacy of the Renaissance. So we're going to see changes in the arts. Art drew on techniques and styles of classical Greece and Rome. Paintings and sculptures portrayed individuals and nature in a more realistic and lifelike ways. Artists created works that were secular as well as those that were religious. Writers began to use vernacular languages to express their ideas, and the arts praised individual achievement. There's also going to be changes in society. So the printing changed society by making more information in works of art available and inexpensive through enough for a society at large. Printed books increased desire for intellectual activity of all kinds throughout Europe, including learning and literacy. Published accounts of new discoveries, maps, and charts led to further discoveries in a variety of fields. Published legal proceedings made the laws clear so that people were more likely to understand their rights. Christian humanist attempts to reform society changed views about how life should be lived. As the secular outlook became more common and as the role of the individual became more important, people began to question political structures and religious practices. All right, let's look at your discussion questions. Number 1, how did the cities of Italy help create the Renaissance? Number 2, what are some of the characteristics of the Renaissance man and Renaissance woman? Number 3, how did the study of the classics influence history, literature, and philosophy? Number 4, what were the major effects of the invention of the printing press? And number 5, how did the literature, the arts, and the role of religion change during the Renaissance? Make sure you answer these in your notes and then put your notes in your notebook.